The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi there, this is your moderator, Lori Dearman, and you're in the right place for transforming elder care with smart sensor technology, featuring Gary Barg, founder of Caregiver Media Group and today's Caregiver magazine, and Rodney Stoops, administrator at Providence Place. I'm Lori Dearman, content producer with WebAttract, and I'll be a moderator for today's session. In just a moment, I'll be introducing our speakers, as today's webinar is about hearing from these experts as they share insights about how technology may give your community a competitive edge when appealing to family caregivers who are dealing with senior long-term care decisions. You'll also have an opportunity to have your questions answered at the end of the presentation during the Ask the Experts panel session. We'll also have Bryce Porter of Intel-GE Care Innovations joining us for the Q&A to address any questions that might come up regarding smart sensor technology. But for now, let's get started as we do have a lot to cover. And we've invited you, along with over 250 professionals from 34 states and provinces, all interested in learning more about what keeps family members awake at night and how technologies such as remote monitoring and motion sensors can provide peace of mind. Speaking of feedback, let's go to our first poll for today. We would like to hear from all of you. What are your two main challenges or objections when addressing family caregivers who call or visit your community? Now, technically speaking, you can select as many as you like, but we're asking you on the honor system today to select your top two. Most of you have logged in your votes, and so let's go ahead and take a look. Very interesting. Looks like we do have a couple of frontrunners here with price differential and senior buy-in, but looks like it's really spread across all of them to some degree. So I think it'll be very interesting as we go through the presentation. You may be surprised at some insights that we've picked up along the way. So thank you so much for weighing in. Okay, without further ado, let's go ahead and meet our featured presenters. We have Gary Barg and Rodney Stoops, and they've put together a fabulous program for today that I know we're all very interested in what they have to share with us. Our first speaker will be Gary Barg, CEO of Caregiver Media Group, also author of the books The Fearless Caregiver and The Caregiving Ties That Bind, as well as founder and editor-in-chief of today's Caregiver magazine and caregiver.com, and host of the 123 Fearless Caregiver conferences that have been held around the nation since 1997. But most important of all, Gary is a family caregiver himself, and he'll share his special insights as it applies to families looking for long-term care solutions. Gary, it's wonderful to have you here with us, joining all the way from South Florida. How are you today, Gary?
I am fine. How are you?
Great.
Terrific. I'm so honored to be talking with you about such an incredibly important topic today. I want to start the conversation with what I like to call the why we all do what we do slide. Alzheimer's and dementia caregivers often experience mental health problems such as depression, anxiety, and substance abuse, along with the physical health problems, and actually have a 63% higher mortality rate than non-caregivers. In fact, in one of the most stunning caregiving statistics that I've ever seen, researchers at Stanford University have discovered that 40% of Alzheimer's caregivers will die from stress-related disorders before the person they care for does. By 2020, 12 million older Americans will need long-term care. Most will be cared for at home, since family and friends are the sole caregivers for nearly 80% of the elderly. For many of these caregivers, at-home care is appropriate, but for so many others, they're literally killing themselves trying to live up to these 40-year-old pledges where they promise their loved one will be cared for at home by them no matter what. In our book, The Fearless Caregiver, we devised a set of 10 principles to help the family caregivers as they navigate the healthcare system. The last two of these principles have much to do with choosing appropriate long-term care for their loved ones in need. The 9th principle is, I will fearlessly honor my loved one's wishes as I know them to be, unless these wishes endanger their health or mine. And the 10th principle is, I will fearlessly acknowledge when providing appropriate care for my loved one becomes impossible either due to concerns for their health condition or my own, and seek other solutions for their caregiving needs. Long-term care placement is an issue that we will all need to deal with at one time or another in our lives, since at this very moment 66.7 million people, or 29% of the U.S. population, which is actually visualized by the states in orange in this slide, provide care for chronically ill, disabled, or aged family member, and spend an average of 20 hours per week providing care for their loved ones, and 13% of them provide 40 hours of care or more. According to the American Health Assistance Foundation, an estimated 5.4 million Americans of all ages presently have Alzheimer's disease. By 2020, the population with Alzheimer's is expected to reach 7.7 million, and by 2050, that number is expected to reach 15 million unless medical breakthroughs identify ways to prevent or more effectively treat the disease. In fact, one of my favorite quotes about caregiving is by former First Lady Ms. Rosalind Carter, a longtime family care advocate, who said, "There are only four kinds of people in this world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers." And I have to say, I think truer words have never been spoken. I started my personal journey as a family caregiver 23 years ago as I helped my mom care for my dad, who retired in '90 at the age of 59, and within 3 months was diagnosed with bone marrow cancer. Mom went from business partner, traveling partner, loving spouse, to being a full-time caregiver as his condition worsened. He passed away a year and a half later, and immediately afterwards, Mom became caregiver for both her parents, who were living with, respectively, cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, and strokes. One of the greatest challenges we faced that was at the same time emotional, financial, and deeply personal was to realistically assess whether it was time to consider long-term care placement for my grandparents. By that time, I was already publishing today's Caregiver magazine and knew a lot of the assisted living and nursing home professionals in our community, but I have to tell you, it was still a challenge. Our placement decision had much to do with our sense of how the facility personnel would partner with us as a primary caregiver, and it also had to do with how well they were going to care for our grandparents as residents. What we learned over the years as long-term care advocates and consumers is that it's imperative to realize just how frightening a situation this is for family members. Most long-term care placement starts from a tipping point. Either a loved one has fallen and can't live safely at home anymore, or is wandering at home, or has developed incontinence. Many times there's no time, as long-term care placement decisions must be made rather quickly. As we've spoken with caregivers over these past 17 years about long-term care placement, many of the check marks against these families' decisions to choose a specific facility have not changed since we were choosing a long-term care facility ourselves in the 1990s. Don't assume that you know who in the room is the family's final decision maker regarding placement. One of the best quotes I've ever heard about family caregiving, especially Alzheimer's caregiving, is, once you've seen one Alzheimer's family caregiver situation, you've seen one Alzheimer's family caregiving situation. When in doubt, assume that everybody has a say in the matter. Show concerns for their loved ones' likes and dislikes from the very first meeting. Showing concern will help the caregiver overcome the fear and even guilt about the necessity of considering long-term placement for their loved ones. What do they like to eat? What do they want to be called? What are or were their favorite hobbies? When doing this, you overcome any of the family caregiver's fears that their loved one will be ignored as soon as the family leaves after placement. Share with them your concerns and solutions for wandering and fall prevention. As you'll see in a later slide, it's vitally important to proactively share with the family members the solutions that you have in place to keep their loved ones safe and secure. Let them know that they will be welcome to attend their loved one's care plan meeting. You know, when placing my grandparents, we were told about where and when the care plan meetings were to be held, and we were invited to join. Yet the staff was surprised to see my mom and I show up the first meeting. They were happy to have us there and peppered us with questions about our loved ones' habits, food preferences, and even temperaments, but they weren't used to seeing family members taking them up on their invitations. Let them know what makes your facility caregiver friendly. Today's Caregiver magazine has been conducting the Caregiver Friendly Award program for the past 10 years for books, media, products, and services. And this year we'll be expanding that to include the certification of Caregiver Friendly Facility for facilities that pay attention to the special needs of the family members as well as the residents. Caregiver friendly elements include comfortable space for family meetings, flexibility of visitation times, and open and easy access to senior staff for questions and concerns. I'd like to share with you some of the top 10 tips we put together to help market to and partner with the healthcare decision makers in your community, the family caregiver. A successful caregiver marketer does not sell products. He or she solves problems. We need to know that you know what we're going through and are not just trying to increase census. Remember that we have probably walked in and out of many of the care facilities in your community in our search for the perfect facility partner. Make their visits memorable in a positive way. Listen to their concerns. Walk them around. Introduce them to staff. Tell them what your caregiving policies are. Let them know that you're there to help solve problems. Get to know your caregiver. Exhibit at community events. Get involved with appropriate local nonprofit agencies. And when you are involved with the community events, just paying your money and showing up to your exhibit table is not enough. Try and get a staff member on the agenda to talk about topics of interest to the caregivers at the forums. Education will lead to trust and the sales will come. Don't treat the time at the event as a punishment, time waster, or just something you got to do. The only times we had any complaints from any vendors at the Fearless Caregiver conferences were from the vendors that we knew, A, were never at their table, B, spent much of the time on their cell phone, C, were always huddled behind their table instead of standing out front and pleasantly welcoming the attendees to their table and talk about their services. Host local professional care meetings at your facility on a regular basis. Pay for newsletters or sponsor walkathons. Being a proactive part of the community will lead to referrals, since the professional and advocates in your community will learn to know how much you care. Because in this case, the old saying is really true. They will never care how much you know until they know how much you care. For your advertising, use simple and open font types, straightforward text, and fewer and more direct words. Use easy to call to action elements. If you want them to respond, make it easy for them to respond. I only have a few comments here. A, please don't let the 25-year-old creative person at your local ad agency create your ad. They have much better eyes than we do, love to use background colors that interfere with the ease of processing and understanding your ad by your potential clients. B, consider that the person that gets your ad, flyer, or mailer will only give you at the most 3 seconds before moving on. What can you do to let them know that you care and that you have the solution to their problems? And if in doubt, show your ad to your mom's bridge club. Talk about a focus group. Information is king. Present qualified information. Leave the sales to the experts. Present qualified information. Leave the sales to the ads. You are the experts. The caregiver will reward you for your valuable information. Become an information resource for your community. You and your staff have a lot of vital knowledge. Whenever possible, have an appropriate staff person respond to any local news story having to do with healthcare or senior care. Speak at local Rotary, Lions, or other service clubs as an expert in health or senior care, or even long-term care placement in the Age of Affordable Care Act. That should get them interested. Leverage your advertising dollars to get advertorial or even editorial space in your local senior publication or residential guide. This is not as easy to do with the local newspaper, no matter how much you advertise, but they're always looking for other voices in their opinion pages. In conclusion, I'd like to share with you the results of a recent Today's Caregiver magazine, caregiver.com poll regarding long-term care placement that we conducted for this presentation. We reached out to nearly 60,000 caregivers and received over 2,000 responses. We asked caregivers to rank these 5 major elements of their long-term care decisions in order of importance: cost, safety, resistance from your loved one to moving, ease of visitation, and does the facility have fall and wandering prevention technologies?
So Gary, before we hear what the caregivers said, let's give the folks on the webinar today a chance to weigh in.
Great idea.
So folks, here is a poll. We'd like to know which of these 5 options do you think came in as number 1 among the concerns. So let's see what we get coming in from all of you, and then we'll share your votes, and then we'll show you the results of the actual survey that was conducted and see how it all stacks up. And you may be surprised by the answer, so let's see. And folks in the audience, this is what you're saying: 36% cost, 17% safety, 32% resistance from loved one to moving, 3% on ease of visitation, and 12% related to whether the facility has fall and wandering prevention technology. So Gary, you want to go ahead and show us how it stacks up?
Yeah, Laura, you hit the nail on the head. The results, I think, will surprise everybody. In order of ranking, the caregivers' concerns regarding long-term care placement decision makings are as follows. Actually, safety comes first. I give that a moment to sink in. And then cost, resistance from your loved one to moving, does facility have fall and wandering prevention technology, and ease of visitation. As I end my segment, I just want you to know that although fall and safety technologies, which were nearly non-existent in the mid-90s when we placed my grandparents, have become a tremendous sense of security, again, number 1 for family caregivers, safety, security, and peace of mind for family caregivers. The reason that we chose the place where our grandparents were to live were actually twofold. First, ease of visitation for my mom, and then we already knew and trusted the facility's admissions counselor since she was already always involved in the community events we went to and always demonstrated how much she cared personally. So when long-term care became necessary, the fact that she worked at the facility went a long way towards our comfort in deciding which facility we would choose. I felt that the poll was extremely instructive once I saw the results, since it showed 1 out of 3 family members were most concerned with safety. If you can address safety issues up front, I believe you'll be able to address their biggest concern immediately. Also, you'll see that fall and wandering management technology is a growing concern. Nearly 15% of responses see technology as an answer to this need for safety. And as baby boomers are shopping for long-term care options for their parents, it's important to be able to make them aware of your technology solutions that can afford their loved ones an added safety net. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to taking your questions at the end of the session.
Well, thank you, Gary, so much for sharing your time, your personal journey, and your expertise with us today. And we will be having you back for the Ask the Experts section after we hear from Rodney. So folks, in Gary's presentation, we see how important the role of safety is to family caregivers, and that it's definitely top of mind during the decision-making process. Next up, we have Rodney Stoops, who has done a great job of addressing this very issue for his residents and in the minds of the family caregivers who are such an important part of the decision-making process. Now, Rodney was called away at the last minute, and he wasn't able to join us live today. Fortunately, however, we were able to meet Rodney earlier and record his portion of the webinar to share with all of you. So let's take a listen as Rodney describes how he uses technology to differentiate his community. I'd like to start out today by having you tell us a little bit about Providence Place and your role within the community.
Well, Providence Place was started about 14 years ago by former Pennsylvania Governor George Leader. And the Leader family has been in healthcare now for almost 51 years. There's 4 properties here in Chambersburg, York, Hazleton, and Pottsville. We are a personal care home community with independent living, personal care, and of course our secure dementia memory care units. I am the administrator here at Chambersburg, have been for the past 12 years. Also the Vice President of Southern Operations and Technology for the company.
Thank you very much for that. And why don't we just jump right into the topic at hand and start talking about how you actually differentiate Providence Place and how technology helps to set you apart.
Well, that's a good question. We got into using new technologies about 7 years ago. We were going with the market. Of course, with memory care, we've seen the growth in this market. We started looking at cognitive therapy programs. We also went with electronic EMR programs for automating our drug dispenses and med passes, which has made a big difference for us. It's actually saved us money, given us more time on the floor with our caregivers. And using the cognitive therapy, we were able to show that folks with memory care issues can do things, that they can have a quality of life. We started with that, and then we started using QuietCare about 2 years ago, which has made a big difference and has set us apart from our competitors.
I imagine that the majority of folks on today's webinar are familiar with the term smart sensor technology, but for the benefit of anybody who might be hearing it for the first time, Rodney, could you define it for all of us?
Yeah, it's a great concept. How do your caregivers keep track of what's going on in the resident's room when they're out and about in the rest of the community, especially in a memory care setting? And really, in this industry, you can't. You really cannot do one-on-one care. We got involved with this about 2 years ago because we had about 10 to 12 falls within a couple of weeks of period, 6 of which were broken hips. And, of course, they did not get to return to our community. So we started looking for something, and, of course, we came across this sensor technology. And with night motion, it allows us to know what's going on in the room. When the resident is getting out of bed within a preset time, we get a quick alert. We know when they're getting out of bed. We're there within just a few minutes to help them meet their needs, preferably before they might fall on the floor.
I could see where there'd be value in that, most certainly.
There's been I can actually give you some stats. We have probably going from an estimated 30 to 40 falls at nighttime in a month's period to about 1 or 2.
Wow. Wow. When families call or come in for a tour of your community, can you walk us through the approach that you take in helping to ease their minds, maybe some of the common objections that you have to overcome, and how technology comes into play as you address these concerns?
Well, I think one of the biggest objections that I think all communities come across is, can you take care of my mom or dad as well as I have? And that's understandable. So once we identify what their needs are, we take them through whether it's a personal care setting or an independent setting or a memory care setting. And then once they see the room, they see these sensors. And it's like, what is this? Are they cameras? What's this for? So the marketers are trained on how to promote this technology. And once they talk about the benefits of it being a resource tool for us, I can tell you in 2 years, it's been receptive 100%. I've had 0 objections to sensor technology.
All right, now I know that conversion rates from visits to move-ins is a key indicator for you. If you don't mind me asking, what is your conversion rate from visits to move-ins in your community? And just wondering, has smart sensor technology helped in terms of your occupancy rates?
We feel it has. We're now looking at 75% conversion rates from tours to move-ins, whereas 2 years ago it was much less than that. We are in a highly saturated market, a lot of competitors in Franklin County, Pennsylvania, and we're the only ones with this technology. So we average now 96 to 98% occupancy, and we believe this technology is one of the big reasons why.
Well, let's turn our attention to the adoption by your staff. Can you give us some examples of how your staff has embraced QuietCare to improve the quality of the care that they deliver?
Actually, that's a perfect question at a perfect time. We just went live with the new QuietCare just this week. So during the training period, they were asked, how do you feel about QuietCare now? And I was sitting in on the meeting, and the staff really loves this system because it is letting them know what's going on in that room with these fast alerts. I can give you a quick example. One of the girls in the memory care unit got an alert because somebody was in the bathroom for more than 15 minutes. So they went right away and they found one of our residents there with a very bad nosebleed. Had that not been in place on 1-hour checks, it would have been a long time before we would have known that. So they're talking about how they love the system because they cannot be in a room all the time. It lets them know what's going in the bathroom, if there's enough activity in the room, if they're getting out of bed, even the wandering alerts. So I'm fortunate my staff has fully embraced this, I guess, this new technology and software.
Now, I know at least one of our registrants asked a question before our webinar regarding kind of the implementation and whether the staff loved it from the beginning, or was there an adjustment period?
I think the initial adjustment was probably a couple of weeks because it is new technology. It's sensor-based. How does it affect them? The response time with the pagers. You know, when you first set it up, there's going to be a couple of weeks where you might have a lot of false alerts, and so the staff's adjusting to this till you make those adjustments. But at the same time, they're seeing how the quality of life is improving for the residents. So, you know, like any technology, you can invest anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000, but if your staff doesn't accept it and embrace it, use it, you're just tossing money to the wind.
And how about in terms of staff management? Do you use QuietCare to help manage your staff, and does this reduce any of the objections that family caregivers have?
Actually, the caregivers, the family caregivers like this idea. The staff, of course, in the beginning wasn't too sure about this because we could actually see movement through the door. So if we know a nurse call bell goes off at, let's say, 11 a.m., we expect staff to be in there, at least our rule here is 5 minutes. So now you can see the movement through the door. So the staff is made aware of this ahead of time, and I think most staff like the accountability portion of it because now they know, okay, I need to make sure I'm on time.
Mm-hmm. And do you use it also in terms of positive reinforcement, that you see that staff are hitting those times and you have some real data to go on there, no?
Well, absolutely. Unless, you know, you've got folks who, you know, you'll get a phone call from a daughter or son and say, hey, look, mom's telling me that, you know, she's been ringing this call bell for the last 30 minutes and no one's entered the room. Now we can go to QuietCare's reporting system and we can see that if someone was actually through the room or not. Of course, we have a system with an count whether the bell went off or not. And this has helped on many occasions and backed up the staff that, yes, they were in the room every time that call bell went off. And when the families see this, they go, oh, okay, mom just likes to ring the bell a lot. Yes.
Good point. Just wanted to give you a chance to circle back, and if you want to talk about any of the benefits that you feel this technology has brought to the residents and has provided peace of mind to family members in general.
Well, I think the biggest thing is peace of mind because you cannot be in the room all the time, even in our independent setting. Independents are basically on their own, and we have, with the use of QuietCare, especially in the bathroom settings, many times we have found residents who, through syncope or whatever, have either fallen, could not reach the call bell, or they're pendant, or who have fallen asleep, you know, in the bathroom. So now we can respond, whereas before we would never know. And that has been very helpful, especially for family members with independent residents. I think the other part of the technology is, I'll give you another great example when we first started it. In our memory care unit, we had a lady who was always coming out agitated, aggressive in the morning. Well, we could look at the reporting system, and we saw that she was actually pacing past every sensor in her room for an hour and a half, just pacing the room. So now we know, okay, her anxiety is acting up. We need to go in at this time of morning now and redirect her whenever we need to calm her down before she comes out for breakfast. We would not have known that without QuietCare.
Great examples. Thank you for sharing them. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about marketing and advertising. So when marketing and advertise your community, how do you go about including the benefits of using QuietCare?
Well, we've used it in our television commercials that we actually show that, and we show it in use. We also use it on our website now, where anyone who visits our website looks at our care levels. They'll see a section on QuietCare, and we explain about what it's about because we feel that it's part of our standard of care now, and we really work hard on promoting that.
And do you include it in any of your print advertising or your collateral?
We haven't done so much in print advertising because we find the biggest benefit is in television and the internet right now.
Okay. And based on all of what we've discussed today, it seems that the implementation was, I guess if you can excuse the term, a no-brainer. But I know that there are always some lessons learned along the way. Do you have any that you can share with all of us?
Well, I think with any new technology, you want to be sure, what are you looking for? What are your goals? And I always try to take a balanced approach. How's it going to affect and benefit the resident foremost? How's it going to affect and benefit our staff? And of course, how's it going to affect and benefit the company itself? And we look for a balanced approach there. And, cost can always be a big objection. These systems are not always cheap, but we found a way to make it work and get a good return on our investment.
And that's actually a perfect segue to the last question I'd like to leave you with today, Rodney, and that is, what return on investment have you seen in terms of implementing smart sensor technology?
Yeah, one of the things that I've done, which I think has made our system successful, is incorporating it with our daily rates. When we first started it, it was an added ancillary charge, and it was a nominal fee to cover the cost. But when we went company, or I should say property-wide with it in all rooms a year ago, we built it into our rate structure. And we're still competitive with their rates. So, that money now goes towards paying for QuietCare, the maintenance of QuietCare, still keeps us competitive. And now you're not charging an added fee, which is one of the big things that people look for when they're touring communities, the number of added fees. So we can normally get a return on our investment within anywhere from 12 months to a big project like this, maybe 18 months, less than 2 years.
All right, and well, I'm really to the end of my list of questions that I wanted to ask you, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to share any other thoughts or insights that you'd like to share with folks that might be interested in this type of opportunity.
Well, I'm glad it came along for us. It was a strange way that it happened. I don't know where we'd be without it. We're getting ready to implement it in our other buildings right now. I think what's important, the most important thing is, what can you do to improve the quality of life for your residents? How's it going to set it apart from the rest of your competitors? Everyone can do the same thing. Everyone provides 3 meals and a bed and clean homes and everything else, but today's decision makers are looking for more. What can you do for my mom or dad better than what I am currently doing at home? And I think when they see the use of the new technology, whether it's sensors like this or an electronic EMR system or a brain fitness system or other technologies that are out there today, you're showing them that you really truly care about providing quality care for their loved ones.
Rodney, thank you so much for taking the time to share all this information and these great insights with everyone, and just want to say have a great day, and it was wonderful having you.
Well, thank you very much, Laura.
Well, folks, that concludes our interview with Rodney, and before we head into the Ask the Expert segment of our webinar, I would like to go to our final poll for today, and we would love to hear from all of you. How can your organization benefit most from using smart sensor technology? Just kind of keeping in mind what you've heard today and some of the challenges that you're currently addressing. Is it market differentiator, improve quality of care, increase occupancy rates or length of stay, staff accountability, or increase response rate to potentially urgent situations? All right, let's go ahead and take a look then, shall we? Got 24% of you saying market differentiator. The front runner here, 44%, improved quality of care. A couple of folks, 3% weighing in on increased occupancy rates, 2% staff accountability, and 26% increased response rate to potentially urgent situations. So very interesting data. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. I wanted to take a moment as well to let you know where you can find more information if you'd like to do so. If you'd like a product brochure from QuietCare, you can go out to the CareInnovations.com/QuietCare website. Also, as Gary mentioned, you can go out to caregiver.com for the online edition of today's Caregiver magazine. Also available there is a subscription to the newsletter. And certainly encourage you to call or email to set an appointment to learn more about QuietCare. Got the phone number there on the screen, and will be on the next screen as well. So folks, we are at that time, so if I can have Gary Barg step back to the virtual podium. And I'd also like to take a moment to introduce Bryce Porter at this time. Now, Bryce is America's Senior Living Manager with Care Innovations, and he's joined us today to address any questions that you might have specific to QuietCare. So welcome, Bryce. You out there?
Thank you.
All right.
Good to be here.
It's great to have you. And let's go ahead to that first question we have here coming in from Linda, and that is, how does QuietCare work? And over to you, Bryce, on that one.
Yeah, we heard Rodney talk about his experience there. Specifically with QuietCare, it's a series of small, passive infrared sensors that are installed in the resident room. You may have 6 sensors in a room, and the sensors within about a 2-week period will detect the activity levels for the senior and create a profile based on their daily activity patterns. The sensors then can provide alerts and notifications to caregivers based on deviations from those regular routines. So that the technology itself will learn those behavioral patterns and have the ability to actually recognize as things are changing. And so as residents are aging in place, can recognize emerging conditions that could be clinically significant in ways that allow staff to be very proactive and anticipate what those needs might be.
Okay, thanks so much, Bryce. Going over to you, Gary. This one from David. The 40% morbidity statistic that you talked about earlier in your presentation is shocking. What can long-term care communities do to help engage with caregivers who may not be ready to consider placement for their loved one?
Well, that's a great question. To help mitigate that 40% comment, I need you to know that 40% of Alzheimer's care die due to stress-related disorders before the patient dies. So it's not a given that that's going to happen, but it's a sense of the stress that the caregivers are under. And you know, there's enough scientific proof to say that when you have a loved one with cognitive disorders, including obviously Alzheimer's, your stress is the greatest measured stress of family caregiving. So what happens now? Well, we as family caregivers, you know, I always say we step into the looking glass once we get that phone call in the middle of the night that, you know, or the test result came back, or whatever the situation was, that all of a sudden you know that your loved one is in trouble. And when you go through that looking glass, you're still living at the last moment you thought about any situation: clinical trial, hospice, long-term care placement. As I said, the principle 10 of the Fearless Caregiver Manifesto is that you have to know what these choices are and when to implement them. So it's important for anybody listening to realize that, you know, engage the caregiver where they are and what they're thinking about with long-term care placement, and then the work they have to do to get their loved one to understand that this is a value to them and to their entire family. I'll give you just a very short story. At our Fearless Caregiver Conference in Miami a few years ago, a gentleman stood up and said he was just about to consider long-term care placement for his mother, and he was in his 50s, and he started crying. And he said, but I don't want to stop being her caregiver. And, you know, before I could answer, or any of the experts on the panel can answer her, 5 family caregivers said, wait, that doesn't happen. With an appropriate facility, you actually extend your partnership. Now you can become the dedicated son or loving spouse or daughter or whatever, because now you have people who are caring for those hands-on, changing mom and making sure she eats and keeping everything tidy. You're not at war with her anymore. You can come and visit. So those aspects of what long-term care placement really are very important to get out to the caregivers and kind of break their myths and get there and explain to them and show to them that it's a viable option to the spectrum of care available to their loved ones.
Okay, this one over to you, Bryce, from Claude. And Claude's asking, how does QuietCare distinguish between the resident and staff for response time measurements?
Yeah, QuietCare, because nobody wears any devices, the residents don't wear anything. It's a passive smart sensor technology that, as far as staffing and the difference between both, you basically can recognize the activity as people are coming and going out of the room. You don't necessarily know which person it is. The system itself can detect if you've gone into the room and the other sensors in the residence pick it up. It can distinguish and check with the other sensors and determine that it was an entrance or an exit. Typically what we hear from those with QuietCare in their community is that you can basically narrow down the data to be able to determine which staff was on shift, particularly at night. If you determine that there was an entrance to the door into their residence and you only had 1 or 2 people on at night, then you have the ability to recognize, if services were provided or not.
Okay, this one for you, Gary, and Andrew is asking, when it comes to seniors resisting their family members to visit long-term communities, what advice do you give family members to help them facilitate a tour?
No, that's another great question. And again, the answer is you have to meet them where they are. You have to meet their loved ones where they are. If the best case scenario is we call preemptive moves, where their loved one is cognitively able to be part of the decision making, and they see it as a better arrangement. It's what they call elder initiatives. An elder initiative initiated, so now it's initiated by the seniors. They help pick the place. They help sort and toss things out. They make sure that that they're in charge, even if they're not, but that they're in charge and they have a decision. Now, many times and most times that doesn't happen. So we like to employ what we call loving sneakiness. So when my grandfather needed to go to adult day, we call the adult day center his job, because he loved to work, and so he went and he was a member of the staff, and so he would stand outside his apartment when he was still living in his apartment and wait for the bus to take him to work, and on off days we would tell him he was on vacation. And then when it was time to move to a long-term care facility, then it was that he had decided to move to a new apartment, and we brought him in, and he came in a few times to the long-term care facility, and everybody played along. So it could be moving to an apartment. It could be, let me meet my friends for lunch and come with me, mom. It could be any number of things. Very quickly, Naomi Feil came up with a therapy called validation therapy, which in essence means meet your loved one with cognitive disorders where they are. Meet their, so the stress and the strain and the frustration and fears they're having aren't necessarily attached to anything real. You go meet them where they are. You tell them, you calm them down, as opposed to what they used to call reality therapy, where you tried to force them into your reality. So when you use validation therapy and you see what mom's concerns are, if cognitive disorder is an issue, then you can help her understand and believe that this is her decision and it's the right thing to do.
All right, this one for you, Bryce, from Bill. We have, how do we implement a program that the staff will embrace and is sustainable long term?
Yeah, that's a great question. like any good technology, it's really as good as those people that use it, right? So if your staff have got to embrace the technology and really see the technology as a tool instead of a chore, and overall, the overall understanding that we've got to have on the workflow, being able to understand how the staff interact with both the residents and their frequency and timing of how they interact with the families. And so being able to have service and support as far as the training for the staff, being able to understand their workflow, and really being able to customize a plan that fits into that workflow, and being able to use the staff and help them understand the overall efficacy of having it, and that it allows them to do their job even better than simply just one additional thing that they need to do. These folks are extremely busy, and they don't need additional tasks. But if it allows them to be in more places than they currently can be in, and allows them to have a better understanding of these emerging conditions, then they really utilize the tool, and it grows legs. It's something that's sustainable and adds value. Being able to have that support and that infrastructure and training in a way that mirrors each individual community's workflow. It's not an easy process, but it's a very important process in being able to determine the long-term sustainability of the program.
Okay, thanks. Got one more for you here, Bryce. How long does installation or deployment take?
Installation is a relatively quick process. From start to finish, if you're looking at, take for example, maybe an 80 to 100 unit community, whether it's assisted living or memory care, that you have a lead time that you want to inform residents and family members, maybe 3 to 4 weeks. The actual installation process takes about 15 to 20 minutes per room. So you're looking at maybe 4 to 5 days of installation, and then there's a period that, as we had indicated, there's a period of learning that goes on once the system has been installed. The profiles are being created based on those behavioral patterns, and over a 2-week period, that's when it builds those profiles. At that point, staff is trained on how to respond to alerts. Staff carry pagers, and they respond to alerts as the urgent alerts come out, and also kind of management staff being able to utilize the back-end software and view the trending patterns. And so that is a training that takes place prior to go live. So you're looking about 3 to 4 weeks before installation, about a week for installation, and then 2 weeks later is when the system goes live following the training.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Bryce. And folks, we are getting up toward the top of the hour, and I just wanted to, before we wrap up, give both of our speakers an opportunity to just leave us with a few final comments. I'll go ahead and start with you, Gary. Anything you'd like to leave our audience with today?
I would. I think that Rodney actually said it extremely well with one of his slides, that we caregivers want to know that you, A, care, but B, can keep our loved ones as safe and comfortable at home, in your home, in the new home, as we did in our home. The key is not to die by 40-year-old pledges. The key is to make sure the caregivers see that long-term care placement, no matter what kind of placement, what kind of facility, is one part of the spectrum of care for their loved ones, that you're part of the community, not just the place where mom goes, so that's why we say you've got to get involved. You have to be an information provider. You have to kind of break down the barrier of, now I'm caring for mom and now she's at a facility. No, they're still the caregiver. They're still the dedicated daughter, but they've actually extended their care into your loving arms. And it really does make a difference when you're able to be out there and talk to the family caregivers about the fact that it's an extension of their own care.
Well, thank you so much, Gary. And over to you, Bryce. Anything you would like to say before we wrap up?
Sure. I appreciate the moment to wrap up. I think that as we talk to communities nationwide, nationwide, the growing trend is very apparent. People are looking when they're going to communities to seek out to move people in, whether it's the adult children or the residents themselves, that the largest priority now is peace of mind. And I think lifestyle is still on the list, but peace of mind is the largest priority. And the communities across the nation are looking for technology that allow them to provide a peace of mind. And this the ability to do so comes by successfully anticipating resident needs. And the communities that do that the best are the ones that are the most successful. It's no longer the objective is to meet needs and as quickly as possible, but the communities that have the best ability to really recognize and act on emerging conditions in ways that protect and safeguard that resident are those that are becoming the most successful. That's what we're seeing over and over again, and the power of being able to be preventative and proactive is quite significant.
Well, thank you both for sharing your insights, and folks, we're at that time and would like to thank each of you for joining us today and hope that you found today's webinar of value and that you'll want to join us for future events. Again, you will be receiving a short survey at the end of the webinar, and we'd certainly appreciate you taking just a moment to fill it out. A copy of today's webcast will be made available as an on-demand viewing, and you'll be receiving it in the way of an email, so keep an eye out for that. Special thanks again to our guests Gary, Rodney, and Bryce, and our sponsor, CareInnovations, as well as our behind-the-scenes logistic producer, Patty Van Hooser, for making today possible. Again, as your moderator, this is Lori Dearman saying thank you and have a great rest of the week. Goodbye for now.